Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad all of you could make it in person, but also hello, everyone joining online. I saw folks joining in from Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, also from the East Coast. So thank you for joining us. Before we kickstart today's activities and fireside chat, I want to make sure we thank our lovely host, Pillsbury, and get them to say a couple of words.
So I'm going to just stand in front of you so that I can be seen on the screen. So sorry that. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Pearson, and I am the global head of Pillsbury's Corporate Securities Technology Group. I sit right upstairs here in Silicon Valley. We're really happy to have you all here. For those of you who don't know, Pillsbury is an international law firm, full service, and we have a leading global startup practice. And so we look to work with technology companies, entrepreneurs, startups, investors, anything technology related. And we have some excellent colleagues here with us tonight. Maybe you can raise your hands so people know who you are. Make sure you get a chance to meet them afterward. And we can help with any sort of need you might have on the startup side, investor side, entrepreneur side. So tax, employment compensation benefits, IP, privacy, crypto, sort of anything that you can think of that a technology company might need, we can help you with that. So definitely keep us in mind as you go forward and might have legal needs. And I think I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Kit, who's going to tell you a little bit about how Pillsbury got involved with this great organization.
Great. Thanks, Christina. And first of all, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Chris. We're really happy to have both of you here. And we're excited to build a partnership with Xoogler and have this event where everybody can have an opportunity to hear from you, Peter. So basically, Chris and I met at a StartX event that happened, I think, in early February, and we got talking, and after a few conversations, we were trying to figure out a way for us to build a partnership and really to have an event here in the Silicon Valley and hopefully more events at other Pillsbury offices. And that's really what got us started on the conversation and really how we ended up here today. And so really happy to be doing this. And we also are doing pro bono work for Xoogler as well, and getting them started incorporating them, filing a 501c3, and hopefully doing more events like this. And so if anybody here is interested in hosting similar events at Pillsbury or one of our offices, please feel free to reach out. I think our contact information is either on the PowerPoint or somewhere else, but feel free to come up to me, Tina, or Christina, or any of our other Pillsbury colleagues. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. And before we start the fireside chat, Navneet, please come up. He's been hosting a regular series of our AI Xoogler events over the past couple of years. So I want to make sure you knew of the next event that's coming up. And for those also joining online, they also broadcast it online. So Navneet, please tell us about yourself, what you do at Google, and perhaps a series of events.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Is this still on? Yeah. So I'm Navneet, also a Xoogler, and co-founder, CEO of Step Function. Won't take too long. I recognize most of the faces here. You guys are regulars. Some of you are real regulars at the TGI AI events. We're going to have one next week. And man, I wish I would have seen this wonderful space earlier and met you guys. But so next week, we're going to do a panel on LLM security with 2 CEOs of startups, local startups, on LLM security. It'll be super exciting. We will send Kushagra, and Chris and I will send information about next week's event, and look forward to seeing you guys there.
Thank you. Thanks, Navneet. Yep. And thank you, Pillsbury, for not only supporting us today, but also incorporating us as a nonprofit. I think it's really important as we started this community in 2015, organizing some events, going to our partner offices, actually now expanding globally. There's over 32,000 people who've signed up on Xoogler.co. And in the day, people want to know, oh, who is behind Xoogler and how many people are there? And I think incorporating it as a nonprofit is super important to get more people involved. And hopefully some of you who want to donate to nonprofits will also consider that as we try to scale what we need to really bring Xoogler community to the next level. So it's a bit of background. I joined Google in 2006. Left in 2015, was in sales, but also in partnerships in the VCs and startup space. From there, when I left Google to do my own startup in 2015, I thought it'd be great to have a community of people to help each other. And here we are 9 years later. And thanks to everyone for coming out tonight to where we get to hear from amazing speakers like Peter. We want to be helpful to each other and give us feedback. What else you like about the Key app as we're trying to make sure the community get to benefit from the learnings, but also meet each other through the online means. We're trying to actually expand beyond Xoogler, and that's where we're going to incorporate Xoogler, but also help our other friends in the tech alumni world. As we know, it's been a tough year or two for the tech industry. How can we follow Xoogler's example and how all of you have given back and replicate this for ex-Meta, ex-Microsoft, ex-Amazon folks? So that's enough about Key and Xoogler. I've had the opportunity to meet Peter's co-founder when I was leaving Google back in 2015. He was the chief operating officer and general partner of Y Combinator. And both Peter and Casa have been very generous with their time and effort, educating all of us and helping all of us up-level our skills in terms of the startup space, but also what's happening in the industry. So when I heard about this Series E that they had publicly announced, I want to make sure Peter came to share more with all of us of what they've been up to since then, where the future of autonomy is with AI, but also perhaps share a bit of how they got here. So before I ask specific questions about the automotive space and AI, there's two things. One is some of you, or most of you, should have got an email from me just about 15 minutes ago regarding the Dory. So we are using Dory again. So check your emails and upvote your questions, submit your questions, and we'll ask them at the end, whether it's getting you to raise your hand here or online. Definitely use Dory. And the second thing is, before I get started with my questions, Peter, why don't you give us a bit of your background, how you got here today, and tell us more a bit about Applied Intuition.
Yeah, happy to. First off, Chris, thanks for hosting me. I'll try to make this fun and interesting. So I was, I guess I'll tell my whole background here. I'm an engineer. I'm from the Detroit area originally. Relevant to Applied, I call myself a third generation automotive engineer. And it turns out the things I learned over the dinner table as a child benefited me a lot here at Applied Intuition. I did my undergrad and grad school in computer science at the University of Michigan, and joined the APM program out of grad school. Through that program, actually, I met Kasser, our CEO, and actually worked in his group on Google Maps a long time ago. And so it's actually crazy to think, but Kasser and I, we go back, I think, 12 years at this point, which is, yeah, quite a while. We worked together for much of that time. And I also got a chance to work on Chrome and Android at Google, and got to see Android Automotive in the relatively early days. And that somewhat led to us starting Applied in 2017. Really recognizing this huge delta between what was considered software development at Google and what's considered software development in the automotive industry. And we thought that in that gap was effectively a business opportunity to build better engineering tools and, frankly, just bring Silicon Valley technology better into the automotive industry. And so we tend to get called sometimes the Tesla of suppliers. So we are a vehicle software technology company. And we are really trying to help the entire industry really compete with Tesla. And Tesla, let's say, is a few percent of global market share, and our customers are effectively the rest of the global market. And automotive is the biggest business, but we also do some work in defense. We do some work in trucking and construction, mining, agriculture. Really, if anything that moves, we think is going to have more advanced software on it in the future and likely have a lot of autonomy capabilities. And our products are really at the heart of enabling that trend.
Great, thank you. And clearly, they didn't call it Gen AI back then, but I'm sure you and Casa and your team has also thought about how you should be using generative AI back quite a few months and years now. Can you share more about your thoughts about the industry and how you are using Gen AI these days at Applied Intuition?
Yeah, so I think it's an incredibly interesting field, and I think the best part is that it's changing so quickly. Like, you just have to stay on top of it every week to really understand everything that's happening. We do a lot of business in engineering tooling, which so similar to you're used to, let's say your build system, your CI system at Google. We've built a lot of these types of things for vehicle engineering use cases, and these workflows I think are all going to be disrupted in some way by Gen AI. And so my view is very much we want to be on the leading edge of that disruption rather than the receiving end of that disruption. And so really across everything that we do, we have roughly a dozen products right now as a company. We have people thinking about, well, how can we apply Gen AI to sort of disrupt the way that we're doing this, or do it in a much better way. And so it really applies across everything that we do. But to give one specific example, which is sort of the simplest one, we have an enormous set of documentation for our products by the nature of how technical they are. I think it's like 5,000 pages of documentation. And so we've made a Copilot assistant for our whole tooling platform. And without the Copilot assistant, you have customers that are asking questions to application engineers. And it turns out your Copilot assistant can be almost as good as an application engineer, actually, in a lot of cases. I think it's roughly half of cases that we see this. And so that's a huge value to our customers, to the company. But yeah.
Are your engineers nervous that it's so effective?
I think my general take on the AI space is it is a tool, and to the extreme end, I would even call it a superpower. And the companies that succeed, they are going to use the tool in an effective way. And the companies that choose not to embrace the tool or are not thinking well enough about how it can be applied, they're just not going to be competitive. And this will fundamentally come down to the business side. Like if you're not using these tools, your margins are going to be terrible. At some point, you're going to start losing money. You'll have lower cost competitors that will take your business from you, and then you'll go bankrupt. And that's just sort of the natural business cycle. So I wouldn't say anybody's nervous, but more so we recognize we want to empower everyone with these incredible tools, and really think of it that way in terms of the development of the company.
So you've been working with the automotive industry for many years, then not only at Applied, but also previously on the Google side of things. How have you seen the use of AI evolve over the past few years? And when you go speak to all these different CEOs and C-suite at all these auto manufacturers, what kind of questions around AI do they ask you?
Yeah, so the biggest application absolutely is autonomous vehicles. When we talk about autonomous vehicles, we have to somewhat separate. There's really two markets. You have the robotaxi market, which is actually very niche in terms of market size. Right now, it's actually hard to quantify that because I don't know how much money Waymo is making, but it's probably not very much, just in the grand scheme of let's say the vehicle industry. And then there's personal car ownership, which is an enormous industry. It's like 3% of the global gross domestic product is personal car ownership. So an enormous industry. So robotaxi is like a rounding error of a rounding error of a rounding error within the market. And if you look at those two different systems, historically, AI has had a really big impact on the robotaxi side, but that actually wasn't really a market, so to say. What's happening now, which is so interesting, is AI is having a real impact on the personal car ownership side within the autonomy realm. And so if anybody here owns a Tesla with FSD, I think it's like the thing that makes FSD so cool is actually not just the technology; it's how cheap it is. The fact that it's just cameras and it's just a few chips on basically one board. Automotive is about cost. Like can you actually make a good solution for cheap? And Tesla has really proven out that is true. And Tesla, acting as the sort of the industry leader, they are let's say putting fear into the market. And everyone really needs to catch up. And this is also a big opportunity for us, enabling our customers to really compete. The Chinese OEMs are a whole nother story, really fascinating stuff happening in China right now. But China has really quickly gone from a laggard to a leader in this whole space.
So you mentioned Tesla, clearly the headquarters, or one of the headquarters around the corner from here where we are. Unfortunately, there was an announcement where they're laying off 10% of their workforce. Any thoughts there? And yeah, what could you share about your thoughts? Why is that happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's hardware is super hard. Margins are super important. It's super tough it's super tough to make money in a highly competitive industry. The tricky situation that Tesla is in right now is they had a head start and they built phenomenal technology, but the rest of the industry is effectively building similar technology. So something that would have only been available in a Tesla 3 years ago is actually more widespread in the industry now. To give one example, General Motors is going to be launching 25 different models of electric vehicles within the next 24 months. So compare that to Tesla's like 4 vehicle types. And so as a consumer who's just in the market for buying a vehicle, and there's many niche market segments within the vehicle industry, Tesla serves some of those niches, but every automaker is going to be making this huge variety of vehicles, and that whole market will be saturated. And I think what's happened is Tesla is realizing that they maybe won't be able to maintain the margin profile that they were expecting for the long-term future, and they're trying to adjust their business to those realities. And I think part of this, there was rumors about them canceling their low-cost vehicle. I don't have any insider information on that, but that could be part of this as well.
Do you see a lot of applicants coming from Tesla over the past couple of years, or how have you seen where do you recruit from essentially?
Yeah, we love recruiting from Tesla, absolutely. I think something like 40% of applied is actually Xoogler's, and also to be clear, we love recruiting from the Xoogler community.
Where's your office around here?
We're in Mountain View, not far from.
No, check out the website. They have, I think, over 100 openings, which is very rare in this day and age, right, for companies.
Yeah.
So where do you see opportunities for AI in the automotive industry besides what you just shared?
Yeah. So I've already touched on a few of these, but I think certainly in the autonomy realm, that's the biggest application of AI. I also want to just take a step back for a second and sort of like define what does AI mean in this context. Like, I really think of AI, it's a function estimator, right? Like you have like in C++ or any language, you think of a function that has certain arguments and some return to it, and then you have some implementation. And the question is, well, is that implementation human written, or is that implementation a model? And then the question is, well, how big of a function can you actually estimate in your function estimator? And what LLMs are proving is you can estimate some really big functions, incredibly large functions. And so if you sort of think of AI in this general, like it's just a function estimator, like what all functions could you estimate? And you start thinking of that in the lens of whatever problem you're dealing with, there's just an awful lot of things that you can estimate. And so in our business, we see impacts again across all of our engineering tools. We do a lot of work in embedded systems and lower level aspects of software that actually runs these machines. And we think there's big opportunity to really accelerate how those systems are built in practice. And then there's the actual, let's say, the algorithms part of controlling the vehicle, and that's also just an enormous space. So there's impact really across the board in the industries that we work in.
Have you been surprised how far AI has advanced in this industry?
Absolutely. So two really important things to call out. One is, I would say, transformers and scaling laws. Let's talk about these two things for a second. So there were a lot of problems where there were data sets that were being created. There were research teams that were working on trying to create models from data sets, and they would get results that were like, meh. Like, yeah, it's like interesting, but it's not mind-blowing. It's not way better than maybe a human-coded algorithm could do. And the magic of transformers was there were a lot of cases where the transformer paper comes out. There's a research group that has an existing data set that's labeled in a certain way, and they basically just flipped the algorithm from the old way to using transformers, and they train it on the same data, and then they get much better results than they previously had gotten. And that's incredible. So that was a true breakthrough. And then I think the other thing that doesn't get nearly enough credit in some of the recent AI moments is the concept of scaling laws. This is also, I think, a paper that I think is an OpenAI paper, which was really talking about the fact that you can predict how well a model is going to behave as you feed it more data. And that's absolutely critical for, let's say, creating a system like Gemini or ChatGPT, because these things become ridiculously expensive to train. And no executive is going to approve spending $100 million to train something unless they're really sure of the performance you're going to get on the other side of spending that much money. And so this paper on scaling laws is just fascinating, because you can actually make a business decision. You can say, if we spend the money to put this data and to train this model, and it really is it's a dollar decision. Like the miracle of GPT is they just spent a lot of money training this thing. You can predict how good it's going to be, and then you can make the business decision before you train it. Are we going to get an ROI if we had a model that behaves that well? And so I think with those insights, all kinds of interesting stuff is happening right now, where you can actually make informed business judgments about how much you want to spend. And like we're now at the scale where my infrastructure team is putting proposals in front of me to spend like enormous amounts of money on cloud for model training. And these are super tough decisions to make, because you really have to think hard. Like, gosh, like that money's not free. Like, we've got to earn that from customers, and if we get that from investors, we're giving up equity in the company to get those dollars. And you want to make sure that you're actually going to get something on the other side.
Talking about having to invest in that, tell us a bit about your recent raise. You raised $250 million at a $6 billion valuation, been around for 7 years. What are you going to be spending all that cash and investment dollars on?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it is partly related to this topic, which is that it's always healthy to have some extra buffer, right, in running a business. Our customers, they care a lot about the long-term health of the company. So this is especially true in the vehicles industry, right? We were talking about this concept of SOP, start of production. And so you have imagine the new Toyota Corolla or something like that, that's going to make it to market in a number of years. And a company like Toyota or GM or Mercedes, they're betting on you if your product is going to be part of what they're doing in production. And you better be around, or else somebody's getting fired there for sure. And they're not going to bet on you unless they know you're going to be around. And so just having more buffer is always important for a business like ours. But the company's also been cash flow positive for a long time, so we're not burning capital. But I think, especially, I'm sure many folks in this room are thinking about AI startups. And there is a real consideration, which is like, it's just super expensive to train some of these models, and recognizing just how much of an advantage like the Googles and the Facebooks and the Apples have in this space. It's really enormous. And so the trick is figuring out how can you spend as little money as possible to get the biggest bang for your buck. But in summary, the goal is to use the capital to accelerate some of our AI initiatives.
Yep. You had mentioned how important these investment dollars are. There was a big announcement regarding Porsche making a huge investment. Can you share more about what you're doing with them and what's the investment for?
Yeah. So we're doing joint developments with Porsche on effectively next generation vehicle software architecture, and it's something that's strategically very important for Applied. We're really proud to have Porsche as the first significant customer of this. And then together we want to bring this to production, bring this into real products.
So you talk about who's in the room, and I think part of why we wanted to have this discussion is that clearly there's a lot of people looking for work right now. And so what kind of AI talent do you usually look for? And perhaps you mentioned 4 out of 10 people in the company came from Google. What parts of Google do you usually try to recruit from? Or
Google engineering, certainly. Within AI, honestly, generalist engineering is vast majority of what you need at this point. I would sort of separate out, let's say, AI engineering from AI research. Within AI research, that's a much more specialized field, and I think the individuals who are really pushing the state of the art in AI research are very few and far between. But in terms of AI engineering, I think we've shown that it's possible to ramp generalist engineers up on the topic fairly fast. I think in a few months, you can effectively learn the relevant things to be a really productive engineer, like building really great product features that are utilizing AI. And so I think my quick answer is just very smart generalist engineers. And then we're really good at training folks to be productive.
Great. So I'm now looking at some of the submitted questions. So from one of the individuals, how has AI affected the way you work as a company? Anything else you can expand there?
Well, certainly I would say it's changed the priorities of various teams and functions. In terms of the day-to-day, I mean, I would say experimented with all of the stuff that you would have expected, like the GitHub Copilot is an interesting tool. Using ChatGPT as parts of like let's say productivity. There's some interesting new stuff we've played around with in the AI agent space. There's a number of companies starting in this space. There's an open source project came out the other day called Sui Agent, which is sort of cool to play around with. I would say though, it's in terms of the productivity of engineering right now, it's having a bigger impact on front-end development. Where like a lot of front-end code is more similar to each other than other types of code. There's also a lot of front-end code online that these models are trained on. And so I think it's having a bigger impact on front-end productivity and probably less of an impact on lower levels of software development.
Cool, thank you. So we're here in Silicon Valley. Clearly Silicon Valley was built based on the research dollars and also so much that's gone from defense. And Applied Intuition has been able to also work with the government and I'm assuming the defense industry as well. Can you share more about how you work with the defense and how separate it is from the regular business and share more for our audience?
Yeah, of course. So we're a vehicle software technology supplier. And so we sell our technology to vehicle companies. And some of those vehicle companies are making defense vehicles, so ground vehicles and aerial vehicles. If you think about the foundational components of these vehicles, they're very similar. Like you have embedded microcontrollers, you have high power compute, you have a networking system. These are the same regardless of what the vehicle is doing. So we do some work with the Air Force, with the Army, and then we also support a number of the large primes. But actually, our work in the defense industry is not so different from our work in the automotive industry, supplying the tools and some of these foundational technologies.
Sure. So for folks in the room who are doing AI companies are thinking about it, what suggestions do you have for them? Are there areas you see there's an opportunity for them to work on?
Don't compete head on with the big companies. You will lose. I think I mean that quite seriously. Just recognizing how big of an advantage the big companies have in some of this stuff, and then not putting yourself on a collision path with one of the mega corporations. So I think the opportunities are going to exist for startups in areas that are more niche, like areas that a Google PM is not going to say like, we should do that. Because as soon as a Google PM says that, you have 1,000 engineers competing against you, which is pretty terrible for a startup. And so I think that really the trick for startups is going to be finding the right niche that's not going to get the attention of the mega corporations anytime soon, and then of course just building a solution that's really powerful for that niche.
So clearly you mentioned about the big companies. Can you share more your thoughts on open source solutions and I mean, open source is it's an amazing superpower for startups, right? A lot of, I think I may be wrong, but I think some of the recent releases from Meta are like either Apache 2 or MIT licensed. So they basically, I think they've dropped the like non-commercial use restrictions on these models, which is amazing. Like they spend $10 billion creating this model, and you can use it for free. You can even sell it as a part of a startup, and you can adapt it to anything that you want. I think partly because Meta has set precedent now, I think Google followed suit with I can't remember what it's called, but there's like a Gemma, yeah. And I don't know what the restrictions are on that license, but I think there is an inevitability that these models will become
let's say, more commoditized. Like there will be very high quality foundation models that are trained on all of the data on the internet. And then those models will be available in different sizes, and everything will be free and available. So I think there's some inevitability to that. And then, yeah, just recognizing to be very careful, like how to actually leverage those things to build good products.
So this is a submitted question, so feel free to keep submitting questions on Dory. For somebody considering an AI focus role, what makes Applied Intuition unique versus large LLM research labs like OpenAI or Anthropic, or small growing teams like Cohere or Adapt?
I think we work on stuff that's more fun. That's personal opinion. I think we do a lot of work that's sort of on the hardware software boundary, which I think is honestly just super cool. We work on stuff that is very impactful in the real world. So there's about 100 million vehicles made every year, and our software technology is touching actually a lot of those vehicles, tens of millions of vehicles. And working with like the actual companies that are really building these things. And people love their cars, people are passionate about their vehicles, and we're right in the middle of that. I think other companies in the AI space, yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. But I think there is something that's particularly interesting, I would say, about the robotics space, but the vehicle space that really resonates with a certain type of person.
When you give advice to your personal friends on your own family members, where do you tell them to go look at for jobs that they should go into, and how should they ask themselves what to go into?
Well, I'm only recruiting for Applied, so.
Applied has a lot of jobs. So this is submitted from Hanson. Hey, Hanson from Malaysia. It's a Xoogler over there. If you recall back at each stage of the growth of Applied Intuition, what were the key successes that sort of marked or that you strive for at each stage? For example, at pre-Series A, was there a key client or use case that really helped define a trigger point for your Series A? And likewise, what success milestones did you consider as being critical for the next step of company growth? The context is he's an angel investor in a couple of startups going through seed and Series A. Thanks, Hanson.
Yeah, I would say I don't want to give an overly simplistic answer, but the answer literally is building something. And when you first start, it's like building something that someone will pay for, and then building something that someone will pay a lot more for, and then building something that someone will pay even more for, and just keep that up forever.
Customers,
that's yeah,
willing to pay.
But no, it really is true. I think our very first set of customers don't exist anymore, which is funny thinking back about the history. When we started Applied, robotaxis were the rage, level 4 systems. And there was, I would say, a poor assumption by the entire industry of how long was the long tail. Generally speaking, people thought it wasn't that long. It turns out it's really, really long. And Waymo is the proof for this, right? Waymo's existed since 2008, 2009, something like that.
Someone knows here. Who worked on it?
2008.
Yeah.
And so, right, they're like 16 years into this, and it's still not a profitable business. So any other company on the planet would not fund a project for that long without making a profitable business. And investors certainly haven't done that. So all of these robotaxi companies have basically gone bankrupt. And a lot of our early customers were robotaxi companies that don't exist anymore.
Were you worried?
Say again?
Were you worried back then when they?
Oh yeah,
slowly...
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, we were paranoid, and so we knew that we, in our own journey, we knew that we needed to get profitable customers, and so we made at some point we made a real, let's say, a shift towards getting. We knew we needed to get profitable customers. Like we know our customers need to exist, and we're only going to exist if our customers exist, and so that was a very conscious decision. But in the very early days, though, I mean, we were just trying to create value. And so create value, sell our products to a smaller company, and then sell our products to bigger and bigger companies, and until we basically reached companies that were again, fully sustainable. And that makes the business sustainable.
Related to the question that Martin submitted, how do you convince enterprise big customers that your startup will be around for many years to deliver and maintain the product and service?
Yeah, that is hard, to be honest. The way that we did it was we raised enough capital early on that we could always tell our customers roughly like, hey, for at least 2 years, no matter what, we're going to be fine. And then as the company, I would say, hit various success milestones and eventually hit break even and profitability, you don't have that ticking time bomb anymore. You can say, well, the business is self-sustaining and we'll be around. But it's a real challenge, and the concern is very legitimate. Like, startups disappear all the time, and if you're in a decision-making role in a larger enterprise, it's like the old saying, right? Nobody ever got fired for choosing IBM. That same mantra gets applied in 1,000 different ways that work against startups. And the only way you win as a startup is you need to find a true champion in the organization, in an enterprise sales cycle. And that champion has to be so bought into your product and so bought into what you're selling that they are willing to stake their career on the line to get you in the door. And if you don't have a champion who is literally willing to quit the company if they don't get your product into the business, you probably won't complete that sales cycle.
And how did you find those champions early on? Were they personal friends that you and Casa had? Did you meet them in conferences? Did you do warm intros, or how did you get those first?
In the early days, the champions were generally people who really wanted to make a career for themselves. This is still probably true today, but now we're a little more mainstream. So like, I don't want to compare us to IBM, but like, we are actually the safe choice in many cases these days to go with. Yeah, we would find somebody who they wanted a promotion, or they had a chip on their shoulder over some bad decision that was made in the company. There was like some reason why they were really willing to stick their neck out and fight for us. And then if they had the right personality and the right influence in the organization, you can leverage. We did leverage them to actually win business.
Find the champion there.
Find the champion.
Whether it's find them online, see recommendations.
It was usually almost anybody can get a first meeting, and then the first meeting is everything, right? Because if the first meeting goes poorly, you'll never get a second meeting. And the goal is always in the first meeting, identify your champion. And if you can reliably do that, you can build a business. If you cannot reliably identify the champion, the business will die very quickly.
Thank you. Somebody questioned, can you talk about the role that culture plays in Applied Intuition in making sure your teams align to the right priorities?
Say that again?
So how do you actually align your team's work to the right priorities? And talk about your culture at Applied Intuition.
Yeah. I mean, I would say great product managers that's exactly the job of a PM, right? Picking the priorities and then making sure that time is being spent on the right things. I think actually a lot of our PM team came from Google, and I was a PM myself at Google, so a long time ago. And yeah, I mean, prioritization is everything. I think our culture at Applied is very customer focused, where we, as much as possible, like we will do whatever it takes to make our customers happy. Like, we will fly to Japan on a moment's notice if we need to resolve some issue. We will lose money on things to make our customers happy. We will do whatever it takes. And that culture, critically, it's built trust. And in our business, trust is everything. If we lose money but win trust, I think that we've actually won, because that means that we'll actually have subsequent business, which is oftentimes larger than the initial business. And so that culture, it's codified in our values. It's known by everyone in the company, and that's one of the guiding principles, I would say, for the organization.
Did you set that up immediately when you were founding a company with Casa, or when did you?
Yeah, we early on, we started the company in a townhouse in Sunnyvale, which I have a lot of funny stories about. But we in that house, we codified the company values, and we've tweaked them, I would say, once every 6 months or maybe once every year. But they're largely the same as they were in the early days. Yeah, so we've been very thoughtful about culture building. And along with that culture, we're very upfront about like what the culture is like in the interview process, and we're like, this is not for everybody. These are the things that the pros and the cons of working at this company, and this is what maybe you like and don't like, and making sure that folks know that before they decide to join.
So what if we've got some audience questions, some live questions? I know, Al, you've asked a couple, and maybe you can start using this mic, and Jeremy can help move this around. Thanks, Al.
Thanks. Yeah, hi there. Thanks for the talk. I used to work for Ford on control systems, and
Cool.
you alluded to it early on with Tesla. Is a key, if I was going to start a startup, is a like reasoning about this, is a key that I could eliminate sensors on a car, for example, because I can predict so well the battery deterioration. Obviously modern gasoline cars have closed loop fuel control systems that learn, but I have to buy an expensive oxygen sensor, catalytic, heat calculations, temperature. Is that a key to like crack through in a startup, to predict so well that it just predicts and you don't need to have a feedback loop?
Are you asking about this specific idea or more generally?
More generally, like you talked about, like with if Tesla, who eliminated all the LiDAR, like they eliminated sensors and they've got a powerful business. Is that like a key? Like if we were going to build a startup, would you suggest figuring out how to eliminate sensors by predicting so well? Just generally.
I think that can certainly that can be, let's say, one important element. The other factors to consider, though, are just how is the competitive landscape going to evolve in whatever the situation is, and like what's the moat that could be built and maintained over time. I think the most important questions, in my view, are the sort of the why us and the why now. So like why us is like why am I or my team uniquely positioned to solve this problem, and then like why is now the time to do this as opposed to like 5 years ago or 5 years from now. And if you have really, really good answers to those questions, you actually probably have the stars are probably aligning for the opportunity. But if the answers to either of those questions aren't quite right, then frankly, I mean, just the capitalist system is probably going to find another business or another set of people that has a better answer to those questions, and the market will naturally favor that rather than yours. And especially in anything involving hardware, you have to be very upfront about just how difficult it is to have a successful hardware business in Silicon Valley, given the margins that exist. And like why couldn't it be done in Shenzhen for a tenth of the cost? And just recognizing we have to play to our strengths here in the Valley.
You had a second question. Go for it, Al.
Yeah, maybe related to that, having lived in Detroit area, I mean, the Detroit area has been very entrepreneurial for a long time, since first auto industry was there. Windshield wipers, power steering, whatever, these are built in garages, hardware. And so what helped them, what gave those guys an advantage? Was it their IP? Was it that they're just smarter than GM's engineers? Like what advantage did they have to build a massive entrepreneur culture that Silicon Valley doesn't have, perhaps?
So manufacturing, especially in the US, is a very, very complicated industry, because you also have things like labor unions and all kinds of other factors that play into the industry. A lot of those technical innovations on the hardware side, and there are still many that are ongoing as well. It's not that this is just a thing of the past. They were done again at the right point in time, where either through patents or for, let's say, just a lack of knowledge of certain knowledge that was concentrated in a certain area, you could actually build a competitive advantage for long enough to build a real business. the history of suppliers is really fascinating. There's this book called Adventures of a White Collar Man by Alfred P. Sloan, who is a founder of General Motors, talking about his career, basically going from ball bearings to effectively inventing the modern corporation. And through that journey, there's a lot of nuanced business lessons that are equally applicable today as they were back then, about just understanding how to actually create moats in these hardware businesses.
Maybe.
Hi, my name is Vishal. I work at a startup called Plus AI. We use your software. I also worked at Canoe, which is an EV startup in LA previously, and we were in talks with Applied for some tools. So I've kind of been fascinated and following Kasar and also you, and primarily his talks from Y Combinator. So the question I have is, because Applied is so customer focused, right? You would have certain branches which are working on specific customer software tools, and there would be a core branch which actually works on building the core features. So how do you, and engineers actually have to switch, right, between these. How do you keep the focus and the motivation up? Because when there is a lot of context switching, that is when, at least I have seen that when there is like rapid context switching, I'm not able to focus. And how do you keep the motivation going in terms of like giving guidance to your engineers and making sure they're working and have the right motivation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for any kind of company that does enterprise software, there's always a set of decisions that happen at some point, which is like how abstracted do you want the core engineering team to be from the customers? And the classic evolution is when the team is very small, the core engineers, they're talking to the customers themselves. Then as the company grows and gets more customers, you start adding on customer success layers and application engineers and account managers and all of these functions that sort of abstract away the core engineering team from the end customers. What's somewhat unique about our business is, right, it's not a mass market product by any means. If you're most enterprise software companies, they're going after like every enterprise, and so you're thinking, well, I have 100,000 customers, like Databricks or Snowflake, something like that. For us, it's a much smaller customer base, but the deal sizes can be much larger. And so in our model, we've specifically chosen to have a lot fewer of those layers, and we actually like to connect the core engineers with the customers, and they really appreciate that and get a lot of value out of that. But the con to that is exactly like you said. There is a context switching, and that can happen in some cases. So generally speaking, we think of roughly 4 days a week we want engineers to be able to focus, and roughly 1 day a week we're okay with context switching. And we that's sort of more philosophical, and we try to think of the work like that. But there's no perfect way to do this, and lots of different combinations of systems that can work. There's a lot of failure modes, I will add, in companies that abstract the engineers too far away from the customers. You end up with products that are actually not solving the customer problems, and there's all of these like crazy workarounds that end up happening in the like application engineering side to like work around deficiencies of the core product. And so there's always this balance of how much to expose the core engineers versus not.
How do you
What's that?
actually... Anyway, so how do you actually make sure that the 4 days which you mentioned, where the engineers focus on specific tasks, right, and do not context switch, is achieved at the technical level? Because it's like, on an abstract level, I kind of understand what you're saying, but how do you actually get it achieved like, on a technical level?
His question was, how do you actually achieve the 4 days of more focused work on a tactical level? I honestly, it comes down to like the managers have to make this kind of thing happen. And so it's having trust with the managers that they're able to do this, and I'm a big believer in the trust but verify approach as well. But really emphasizing there's not a perfect way of doing this, and you're constantly balancing and adjusting. Like, oh, this escalation or whatever this issue is hitting this individual too much. Okay, let's remove them and have someone else step in. That kind of thing.
Should be good.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Chris, for orchestrating this. I quit Google about 7 months ago to start my own thing, and I realized that we were living in a bubble. When I was at Google, it's a different world altogether. It's not the reality. It doesn't represent the real world. When you get in the real world, you instantly hit the reality of, like, you have to do a startup, the resources that were at your disposal. You don't have that. The talented people that you work with, you don't have access to any of that. And then you have to start your journey from 0 to 1, right? Without all those resources. What is your advice to people who are starting their journey from 0 to 1, right from hiring, product development, and also raising money, which is the oxygen for a startup?
I could give a multi-hour answer to that one.
We'll stick around here.
Yeah, I would say, just very practical advice for anyone. If you're going to start a company, make sure you have enough savings, because you can't count on getting funding, especially if it turns out that your idea is not resonating with what investors see in the market. So I distinctly remember in my own case, and I lived in like the cheapest, crappiest apartments the whole time I worked at Google, and I just saved every penny I possibly could. And I drove an old car, and my plan was always, I'm going to start a company, and I was going to work at Google as long as it took me until I had something that I was confident enough to quit my job. And then when the stars sort of aligned in that dimension for myself, I mean, like, I had enough savings that I wasn't really worrying about money. I didn't have to worry about, like, are we going to close this funding right now? Because I knew that I'd be fine living off my savings for a while. And so I think that's just like a very, very practical advice. I think what can happen many times, if, like, Google pays really well, and oftentimes people will adjust their lifestyle up to their pay. And then if you have a high cost lifestyle and you're driving an expensive car or have a big mortgage, it's very difficult to leave that position, because you literally can't. You're like, well, what am I going to do? Like, I mean, it's like sell my car, and you get it. There's a very practical aspect to that. And I think that's actually that, like, scrappiness is very important in the 0 to 1. And especially in the early days, I mean, just being cheap as hell on everything. We in the early days, before we had any big customers, we were trying to get some automakers in Detroit to use our products, and we would take the Spirit red eye, which is like, if you've never flown Spirit, which Googlers probably are not forced to fly Spirit, I think you have to pay for the water. You pay for everything at Spirit, but no, it's extremely cheap. And so just keeping your expenses super, super low, so that when you actually have that initial market signal, you're in a position of strength to take advantage of that, and not in a position of desperation. If you're ever in a position of desperation, you end up signing on bad terms. And if there are any aspiring entrepreneurs in the room, I highly, highly recommend, like, really understand how venture capital really, really works. Like, understand what's the source of the money, what are the roles of the junior partners, the senior partners, the general partners, what's a fund size, what's the fund length, what's the deal structure, and like, you should know what, like, 2 and 20 is in the VC realm. And there's this book called Venture Deals. Highly recommend reading that if you're really early on. Just sort of explains effectively how a venture fund works. And also really important to call out that there's a very big difference between a small business and a venture-backed business. And then recognizing, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to choose which of these am I actually going after. And so, like, a small business, you can run with very little funding, make it profitable early on. It could be a good lifestyle business, support your family, that kind of thing. Venture-backed business, venture investors, they want to see huge returns. Like seed investors, they're going for the lottery ticket that this company could be worth 1,000x with what they bought in at, and that's a very different corporate structure. And also, frankly, investors don't really care what the company does. They just want a return on the money. If all you were doing was creating it's like a black box ATM, and the investor sticks in $1 and they get back $1,000, they don't care what happens inside of that machine. they just want the $1,000 on the other end. And once you recognize that, it also can impact how you're pitching your business to investors, is recognizing how important the financial aspects of it are. And it's the technology is just an enabling factor to the financial returns that the investors want to see.
So since this is a community event, there's a lot of community members here who know what Peter was just mentioning. There's at least two I recognize. You're going to raise your hand if you can actually explain what Peter was mentioning in terms of how venture capital works. You sort of know John, so he was the legal counsel at Capital G, if I'm not wrong. So Google's late stage fund, and Shabi, wave your hand. Was at Kleiner Perkins and founding partner at Gradient Ventures. And anyone else here worked in VC? Yep. Own VC fund. Mandel can not only write you checks, he can educate you too. So look, this is a community event. Go speak to them afterwards, and they'll teach you something which perhaps other folks may not be willing to. So talk about the culture and perhaps the interviews of what you do at Applied, right? Some people watching here and perhaps in the room are looking for work. Like, how do you vet your candidates? And when they come through the interview cycle, like, can you just share what they may go through so they can prepare a little bit?
Yeah, of course. We happily borrowed a lot of ideas from Google, frankly. And so I think our interview process is not terribly different from the Google interview process. If for those of you who maybe worked in recruiting or are familiar with Google recruiting, what was so amazing about Google recruiting was it's like optimized through data science. And so like, why does Google do, and actually, by the way, my data is 7 years out of date, so they may have changed things since then. But like, why does Google do 4 technical interviews, or at least they did back then? It's like, well, they used to do a lot more, and then they had all this data that showed that, well, anything past 4 didn't really matter. You didn't actually reach a different decision on the candidate. And so it turns out 4 is a good number. And so Google has finely tuned their whole process, and then we've just frankly copied a lot of that process. But yeah, so if you're interviewing at Applied, expect a very Google style, like a phone screen, and then an on-site interview that has roughly four interviews. And then we sort of conclude our interviews with what we call a leads chat, which is the candidate meeting with some of the senior leads in the company, and just sort of talking more about sort of their ambitions and just getting to know them a bit more as a person rather than just somebody who's there to do a job.
Any final questions?
Kit Ryan from Pillsbury again. Thank you for everything. It's been really interesting to hear all of your thoughts. Well, first of all, Venture Deals, fantastic book. I can't recommend that book anymore. Make the Deal is also another one. You should definitely check that one out. My question is, how influential were any of the investors in the decisions that were made over the course of the life cycle for the company? And do you have any battle scars or recommendations for entrepreneurs when they're going through a capital raise?
That's a really good question. So firstly, I would say I feel super fortunate. We have a really strong set of investors in Applied. Yeah, Mark Andreessen, Lux Capital, General Catalyst, and really a long list. Like we have a sort of the who's who of Silicon Valley on the cap table. Chris, you're also an investor. Thank you. And the value of investors is they can give advice, and then their advice is aligned with the success of the company. So like your investors have no reason to give you bad advice. And I think particularly the investors that we have, because the investors have been themselves very successful, they've seen a lot of patterns in their work of like what makes a company succeed, what makes a company fail. And I think we've also worked hard to have a very good relationship with our investors. And so when we have really tricky questions, we reach out to them, and they've always given us very, very good advice. I would say like some tricky stuff that we've dealt with would be, as I mentioned, should we be opening international offices? That's a pretty big decision for the company, because you actually do risk diluting your focus on certain areas. Should we enter China as a market? That's a really big decision. We've chosen not to for a bunch of reasons. Like, should we invest in this new product line where we know that there's going to be heavy competition? But we think that we can do something unique in it. We bring those questions to our investors, and they generally just tell us stories. They'll say, well, I remember these 5 other cases that were each a little bit similar to this, and then we just try to pattern match those things, and that kind of advice is really invaluable. And then the second part of your question was around like
stars or tips that from your experience that you can give to entrepreneurs when they're going through the negotiation process of their capital.
Yeah, I mean, negotiating with investors is no different from any other kind of negotiation, in the sense of it really just comes down to you need multiple bidders for whatever it is that you're doing. And this is like 101 in any kind of procurement cycle in any company. Like you don't want to procure from a single vendor, or like get a single bid from a single vendor. You don't want to, when you're raising capital, you don't want to get a single bid from a single investor. And if you have multiple bids from multiple investors, then you can chop the deal. You can understand what's market, so to say, and then make the best decision for the company. This topic is very well explained in the Venture Deals book, but it's important to recognize that like a dollar is not the same from different investors. You'll get wildly different terms that are offered with a dollar. Things like liquidation preferences is a really important term, anti-dilution rights. There's all kinds of nuanced legal terms that exist in a stock purchase agreement, and really understanding what all those terms mean and having that knowledge as a part of the negotiation is really critical. I think if you don't have that knowledge and you're going into a negotiation with investors, you will get screwed. And so just recognizing that up front.
Peter, I know a lot of people, whether online, but they're going to watch this later. Could you actually explain what each office works on and what jobs are available in your company?
Yeah, absolutely. So our headquarters is Mountain View. About 2/3 of the company is in Mountain View. We're over 500 people now globally. And about 80% of the company is engineering. And so we're always hiring engineering roles, really of like every seniority. We have a lot of business. Like we're in a very fortunate position as a company right now. 18 of the top 20 global automakers use our solutions today. And so the answer, frankly, is like across the board. And generalist engineers are extremely important at Applied. We also have a lot of specialist roles that are say more automotive related, but I don't expect necessarily automotive engineers in this crowd.
Cool. And the different offices, they just work on something similar? It just depends on market by market, or?
Yeah, so our offices are in all of the major automotive centers globally, and so we have customers in each of those regions. For example, we have offices in Michigan. We have Detroit and Ann Arbor, and in Germany, we have an office in Munich. We have an office in Stockholm, Sweden, in Seoul, South Korea, and in Tokyo, Japan. And then our government business is headquartered out of Washington, D.C. So each of those offices, they're both supporting local customers as well as doing engineering work for the products. And yeah, it's a very I would say a very diverse company globally, and I would say that the global culture is actually one of my favorite parts about this particular business that we're in. It's pretty unique about the automotive business, just how global it is.
And the final question on the recruitment side, you guys sponsor visas for the US?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, great. And anything we didn't cover about Automotive's AI future that you want to make sure you mention to this crowd?
I mean, I think I've already given my recruiting pitch, or check out our careers page.
Cool. Well, that's a wrap for today. Again, thank you so much, Peter, for sharing so much advice and sharing with this audience today. And then finally, thank you again for Pillsbury for hosting this lovely space, the drinks, the food. We couldn't ask for a better location and better partners in Pillsbury. And thank you also for helping incorporate Xoogler as a nonprofit to serve our members even better. And for people who run nonprofits, I've been on board. Come speak to me, please. Let them learn more how we can make this a more effective organization for all of you. Thank you.